goes out that door, is he close enough for you to call him
I
back or
always
not?
told him that, yeah. I've always told him,
Stay
like, don't
close.
go too far because if you don't see me
Right.
live, let me check
Does he
something.
watch in another room or what?
Yeah, we usually wait to give the girls a nap right about now, and then he takes them to the park first, and then they take a nap in the car, and he just watches on his phone.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
Let me see if I can get him back in here. Oh, we are live. It just popped up. So
We
you've
are.
probably been listening to us talk, but we're here. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. So I have Dr. Lorraine Day back again, and we're just going to jump right in since we've already been babbling. Dr. Lorraine Day is an internationally acclaimed orthopedic trauma surgeon and best-selling author who was for 15 years on the faculty of the University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine as associate professor and vice chairman of the Department of Orthopedic Surgery. She was also chief of orthopedic surgery at San Francisco General Hospital and is recognized worldwide as an AIDS expert. And today we're going to be talking about false flags and how to prove that they are false. And so, without any further ado, Dr. Day, take it over.
Okay, I thought, is it okay with you if we talk just a little bit about Antifa, since they have been after you and
Oh,
they
yeah.
have been after me, sort of? I would just like to say to Antifa that you are doing this, of course, just to make money, because when you're interviewed, you don't even know what you believe. And George Soros is the funding behind it. Of course, he's a Jew of the Illuminati ilk and with the Rothschilds, and he's doing their bidding. But now there are Antifa members and other protesters that have been promised by George Soros that they will get money, but he's not paying them. So you need to understand that George Soros is a Jew, and recently was the holiday of Yom Kippur. Now, the streets, by the way, in Santa Monica and West Los Angeles were empty on Yom Kippur because that's where all the Jews live, and they were all at synagogue. And so it's the major holiday, and they pretend like they are absolving themselves of their sins, but that's not what Yom Kippur is all about. Yom Kippur is the day
Breaking
that
up.
Jews go to synagogue. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, and I can still make out what it is that you're saying, but every once in a while it freezes and it's.
Oh,
What's
oh
that?
really? Okay. Can you
Just
hear me
keep
now?
rolling. Usually it starts to smooth out.
Okay. Well, Yom Kippur is the day that the Jews go to synagogue for one specific reason, and that is to ask forgiveness for all the lying, cheating, murdering, and every other sin they're going to do in the coming year. Not for past sins.
Ahead of time.
They get a solution for the sins that they're going to commit in the future year. Well, of course, that is absurd. And so, to ask absolution ahead of time means that you know you're going to do it. So that's what Yom Kippur is all about. So in the Talmud, it says that a Jew can cheat a Gentile and God approves. So Antifa, you are all Gentiles. Most of you are Gentiles. So George Soros isn't going to pay you. He's going to tell you he's going to pay you, but he's not. And if you're grown men, if you are mature adults, then you will not wear masks over your faces. That's what children do. I don't wear a mask over my face. Everybody knows who I am and what I say, and I stand behind what I say. You are all cowards. That's why you wear masks over your faces. So you're just like little boys who want some big Jew to hand out an allowance to you so you can misbehave. That is not the way to change anything, and that's going to come back to bite you in the backside. So I would suggest that you become mature men, take off your masks. If you want to change society, do whatever you can, but acknowledge who you are. Don't be anonymous, because again, that is a sign of immaturity. All right, so now we can go on. Let's go on to, I'm going to try to do these in somewhat chronological order. The first one is the Oklahoma bombing in 1995. The version of the government is that Tim McVeigh, who was a disgruntled activist, took a Ryder truck filled with manure or some sort of thing that would explode and parked in front of the Murrah building in Oklahoma City and detonated this truck full of explosives. Well, first of all, you need to know that Tim McVeigh worked for the BATF, the Bureau of Alcohol and Firearms, all right? So he was a government agent. He did not know, they keep everybody so much in the dark, like they did with Lee Harvey Oswald, who was accused of shooting JFK, the president. He did not know that he was going to be set up to do that. Whether Tim McVeigh knew or not that he was going to be set up, I don't know. But he was a government agent. He took this fertilizer bomb, supposedly. Now, here are the problems. Number one, a fertilizer bomb in a truck will explode circumferentially. There was no damage on one side, and all the damage was on the side of the Murrah building. That cannot happen. It explodes like this all over the place, not just in one direction. Number two, those pillars of the Murrah building could not have come down with just a fertilizer explosive or any explosive that was in the truck. They had to have explosives wired to the pillars, which is what they did also at 9/11 in the Twin Towers. Thirdly, as I said, the truck would have blown up circumferentially. If you look at the aerial views of the Murrah building, even then, some is more destroyed than others. And so it's clearly not a circumferential bombing. There's no crater under the fertilizer truck. The road was not disturbed. And so again, this explodes circumferentially. It goes down as well as up and as well as out. There was no crater underneath. Number four, that Ryder truck was seen in a government parking area by an aerial view. I have had that on my website, but they're removing all of these kinds of things because they're revising history. So that Ryder truck was identified as being on a government parking area before the day before the bombing occurred. The next thing is that the people in the back of the Murrah building that were working saw the FBI putting up the yellow tape before the explosion occurred. You don't do that unless you're clairvoyant. Later, the FBI was interviewed, and they said that they came into Oklahoma the night before the bombing. Well, how did they know it was going to happen? Well, of course, they knew because this was a government plan. The next thing is that after the first bomb exploded and they were bringing in a lot of people who had been killed or injured, and by the way, people were actually killed and injured in this event. Some of the others that we're going to be talking about, they weren't, but this one they were. Doctors at the hospital in Oklahoma City were telling the press that they had suspended, the paramedics and all had suspended going into the wreckage and taking people out for a short time. They had suspended their activities and weren't bringing anybody to the hospital because they had found 2 more bombs in the building. Well, if the fertilizer truck did all the damage, well, then why are there 2 more bombs that are unexploded? And then the cameras from the news people actually showed this interview with the doctors at the hospital talking about the other 2 bombs. And then it showed the truck that was being brought up to put the 2 bombs in so they would be safe if they happened to explode. So all of this tells you this was not Tim McVeigh. he really had nothing to do with it, except he was sent there as a government operative to take the hit, whether he knew that he was going to take the hit or not. General Ben Partin, who was a general in the military, has, if you look up his name on the internet, Ben Partin, Partin, he has a whole thesis on this showing that there is not enough power by a long shot with a truck bomb like that to do damage like that to a building of that size and strength. So he has said, and he is an expert in explosives, so it could not have happened that way. The next thing is Tim McVeigh was arrested and he was put in prison. And then he was tried and found guilty and was to be executed. Well, I knew ahead of time that he was not going to be executed because they did several things. Number one, they moved he asked for his execution date to be moved up. Nobody who's going to be executed ever does that. They want all the time to make more and more pleas for a new trial and all that. He asked for it to be moved up because what he knew is that if he kept his mouth shut, they had promised him that they were going to get him out of there. All right, so that's why he wanted it moved up. Secondly, they made an announcement ahead of time that his medical records would be sealed for 25 years. Well, why would they do that? There's no reason to do that unless they're hiding something. Number three is that they said they were not going to donate any of his organs. Well, you know, he's a young man. They could get probably $500,000 for his organs. Why would they not do that? He was not a drug addict. So why wouldn't they do that? The next thing is that most people don't know who was in charge of the people who were going to watch him being executed. And that was Chandra Levy. Does that name ring a bell? Chandra Levy? She was at that time an intern for the prison system. She later was involved in a scandal with one of the congressmen from California that supposedly she was having an affair with. It turns out that Chandra Levy, why would she be in charge as an intern in the prison system of the people who were allowed to watch Tim McVeigh's execution? Well, the answer is that she was actually an Israeli Mossad agent, and so were her parents. Chandra Levy later was murdered, probably by the Mossad, because she found out things she was not supposed to find out and maybe told others. So the next thing is one of the women journalists, and I have this in my article on my website, which is still up, by the way. If you go to goodnewsaboutgod.com and you click on the homepage on the red rectangular link that says political truth, and then you go to false flag attacks, you will find the article there. And this woman's name, I think her first name was Susan. I give her full name in this article. And she was watching Tim McVeigh's supposed execution. Well, as they were talking about it, they said that they had the IV to give him an overdose of narcotics or whatever they were going to give him to kill him. They had the IV in his leg. Well, I'm a trauma surgeon. No surgeon of any sort would ever take a patient to the operating room with an IV in their leg because there's no place to put it. There is no major vessel close enough to the surface in a human being's leg to put an IV. The only place you could put it is in the back part of the knee, where you have a huge vein that is about an inch deep. You would never put an IV in there and have the patient lying down on a table because you couldn't get to the IV anyway because it would be behind his leg. You would never take a patient that was going to have a major operation with their IV in the foot. There are veins that you can put it in the foot, but you would never take a patient to the operating room because it would take too long for whatever you were injecting to get to the heart, and it could go too many other places. So you would either put it in what's called the antecubital fossa, the front part of the elbow at the arm. You might put it in the hand. But if you couldn't get a good IV in either of those places, you would do a cut down up here and put it in the superior vena cava. That's what you would do. So you would never try to euthanize or execute a criminal by putting an IV in their leg. You can't do that. You can't do it. And so I knew when they did it, they weren't going to kill him, because they said his IV is in his leg. Well, you can't put it in the leg and do this. That's number one. Number two, this woman, Susan, was a journalist, and she watched, and she went out immediately and filed her article with her paper, and she said it was interesting that even after he was dead, he was still breathing shallowly. Well, guess what? You don't breathe at all after you're dead. But she's got to be an airhead. The journalists they love. She must have worked for CNN. And so she said even after he was dead, he was still breathing shallowly. I mean, you've got to have only half a brain to talk that way. So obviously he was trying to breathe as shallowly as possible, but was not successful at it. So they pronounced him dead and took him out, and he's not dead. I knew that. I don't know where he is. They probably gave him plastic surgery, and he's still working for them. I think there was one other thing, too, with Tim McVeigh, as there was with Sirhan, and many of these others who took the hits for these assassinations that they didn't do. For years, whenever you would hear the name of, what was his name? He was the chief of psychiatry at UCLA, and he was head of the MK Ultra program, which is the brainwashing program for the CIA. And he would be the only one that would be allowed to interview these guys while they were in prison. So when I saw, I will think of his name in a moment, when I saw that he was going to interview Tim McVeigh, I knew immediately that this was a government thing. And when I found out that when Sirhan's been in prison a long time, the prison psychiatrists, they're not allowed to interview him. Only this guy who is from UCLA, who's dead now. He died in the last few years. But for years, whenever I would say, oh, his name was Louis Jolyon West. Dr. Louis Jolyon, his middle name was Jolyon West, and they always called him Jolly West. And so whenever Jolly West was en route, say, to the east, where he was going to interview Sirhan or anybody else like James Earl Ray, this is a government job, because that he was head of MK Ultra. So all of these things show you that the Oklahoma bombing was a government job, and what happened shortly after the Oklahoma bombing, within about 2 weeks, they passed a major law taking away our rights, the Patriot Act or something like that, which was a bill that had something like 1,500 pages in it, and it was passed like 2 weeks after the Oklahoma bombing. You can't write a 1,500-page law in 2 weeks. You can't do that. So this was all clearly written ahead of the Oklahoma bombing. They had the Oklahoma bombing, and they made sure that they killed a lot of children, because then that gets people's attention. I mean, it was a terrible tragedy for the families. I'm not discounting that at all, a terrible tragedy. However, this is what they do, because, you see, the Jews don't care about those children. Those children, it's to them, they are just like killing rats. That's the way they think of all of us. They call us the Goyim. We are lower than animals. And so when they kill children, it's nothing to them. When the Jews in Israel kill the Palestinian children, it's just like stepping on a a cockroach. They feel nothing about it because they feel that those people have no souls. We have no souls. Our only purpose on this earth is to be slaves for them. So they don't care how many children, but they know that if they have a lot of children involved, a lot of children are killed, that will be a very fracturing memory for all Americans. And that's what they want to do, because part of mind control is first you torture or you make something happen in a person's brain that puts them all off kilter. Then you implant the memories. And so that's what they're doing. So they pass the Patriot Bill and we have to have more safety, more safety. Every time they say more safety, they're taking away more rights. And so it's the government doing this. So also, I have a lot of inside informants. And within 24 hours, I had on my fax machine, 24 hours after the Oklahoma bombing, I had the seismographic records that shows that there were more than 2 bombs. Okay, so clearly it was supposed to be just 1 bomb that was in the truck. So clearly we know that that was an inside job. And by the way, I am writing a book now. I'm just finishing up my book, which will probably go to the printer in about 2 weeks. And I've talked about this before. The title of it is Who Started the Organized Church? It Wasn't God. And the subtitle is, For the First 4,000 Years of Human History, No One Went to Church. Then What Happened? So that one's just about done. So I've already started on my next book. The working title of that is The New World Order and the Enslavement and Extermination of Humanity. And in that book will be all of these things that I'm talking about today with all of the evidence. So I don't ever talk about anything that I don't have absolute evidence for. It's very difficult to show it all when we're talking like this in Skype or on a radio show, but all of the evidence will be in this book. Probably won't be ready for at least a year if they don't behead me before that. So anyway, that's the Oklahoma bombing. And the Oklahoma bombing had a very specific purpose, and that was to get the Patriot Act passed, or whatever bill it was. There's so many of these false flags, I can't remember which one it was.
Sorry,
was
he the one that was tied into the Christian identity compound as well? Was that Tim McVeigh?
Oh, but see, no, he wasn't. He wasn't really at all. They just did that for the news media to try to have a backlash against Christians. He wasn't tied in with the Christian identity at all. No, he was a government agent. All right. So at any time they do the Christian thing, with there was a fellow who lived out in the woods in Idaho. What's his name? And all he wanted to do was live with his family out there. He happened to be a Christian, but he wanted to get away from all the turmoil that was in the cities and raise his kids in the country. And so all the things that they're trying to do to smear Christians, it's because this is really, if you look at the very top of what's happening at the very top level, this is the great controversy between Christ and Satan. And the Jews, Jesus said to the Pharisees, you are of your father, the devil, because of their traditions. He said, by your traditions, you make the word of God of no effect. So he said they were the synagogue of Satan and of your father, the devil. Well, the Pharisees, now these Pharisees were not Jews. There were no Jews in the Bible. The word Jew is not in the Bible. We've discussed this before. It's been written in. The word is always Judean. Oh, I don't know if I've told you this, but this will probably be interesting to those who are watching. The word, there was no J in the Hebrew or Greek alphabet. And J was not commonly used in any language until about the 16th century. So they were not called Judeans, they were called Iudeans, I-U-D-E-A-N-S. And Judah was I-O-U-D-E-A, Judah. Well, guess who was the most brilliant person in Star Wars? It was a Yoda, right? Mm-hmm. Y-O-D-A, that's I-U-D-E-A. That to them means Jew. Wow. Okay? So they made the smartest guy in the movie. And who was the movie produced by? It was produced by Jews.
Right.
Nobody knows. And this is what they love to do. This is called revelation of the method. They want to push it right in your face, and you don't have any idea what's going on. And almost nobody understands that that word is Yoda, I-U-D-E-A, which meant Judah, which they say is Jew.
Wow. Didn't make that connection yet.
Well, again, we've talked about when you get on the internet, it's www, right? www. All right. So what is W in Hebrew? It's the letter Vav. And there are no numbers in Hebrew. And so the number is what the letter would be in their alphabet. Like our number would be, 1 would be A, and 2 would be B, and 3 would be C. Well, Vav is the 6th letter in their alphabet. So when you go on the internet, you're putting in 666, which is the number of the beast. So there you go. You didn't know that either?
I don't think you told me that before. No, I would have remembered that.
So every time you go on the internet, you're typing in 666.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's the same way when you drink the Monster drink, which I hope nobody that's watching drinks because it will kill you.
Highly doubt.
So what are those things on the front of the Monster drink? That is the letter Vav in Hebrew. And there are 3 of them. And that's the number 6. So when you're drinking the Monster drink, it's 666.
Wow.
So there it is. All you have to do is go on the internet and ask to just type in the letter Vav, which is W-A-W, Vav. It's pronounced with a V, but it's a W, A-W. And that is the 6th letter. And you will see that that is what is on the front of the Monster drink. So it's everywhere. It's everywhere. We have discussed, haven't we, how all of the logos on the cars are satanic symbols.
I know that we have. I don't know if we've done it on a live stream.
We won't do that now. We'll do that some other time. But anyway, they're all satanic symbols. All the logos on cars are satanic symbols. And we have when you drive from where I live west towards Los Angeles, you pass the Morongo Casino. And they have this large building, which is the hotel. And at the top, nobody ever notices it. It's a cobra, a snake, which represents Satan. And then, but they don't have it so it is directly at the road. They have it sort of this way. So unless you know what you're looking for, you won't see it. And then the eyes of the cobra on either side of the building light up at night. And they have, they do their advertising on this because this is a huge building. But if you look at it straight on, you'll realize it's the head of a cobra. And of course, it is a phallic symbol because it is a long, tall building. And then the entrance to the building is all of this lattice work, which represents the female genitalia. So they are worshiping the reproductive organs of human beings because, see, Judaism is not a religion. It's a cult of sexual debauchery. And that's why when the Jews go to the Wailing Wall, you know how they daven? They daven like this. Well, everybody's looking at their head. You look at their pelvis, and they are actually moving their pelvis forward towards the wall because that is a sign of reproduction, sex. And so they think that they honor their God, which is Satan, by having sex with anybody they want. You see, and they used to have sexual prostitutes. In the Bible, it talks about that in the pagan temples for sexual prostitutes. So this is all rank paganism. Judaism is rank paganism. The Talmud and the Kabbalah are all paganism. It's not a religion. This is a sex cult. So there's the Oklahoma bombing, which happened in 1995. So now we'll go on to the Twin Towers, to 9/11, which happened in 2001. What it might be interesting for all of you watching to understand that the first time an American president talked about a new world order was Senior Bush, George H.W. Bush, who talked about it in a speech he gave on 9/11/1990. 11 years to the day before they did 9/11. Now, also with 9/11, after the incident, people started showing that they had predicted this incident long before it happened. There were rap albums 2 years before. And of course, the whole music industry is run by Jews. There were rap album covers that had the Twin Towers on it with a plane hitting it. And there were all sorts of other things like on The Simpsons and various places that showed they were going to do this years before it happened. Well, as you and I have talked privately before, there is some indication that they're planning possibly another false flag attack on November 3 this year. That's just within a couple weeks in Seattle, because they already have been making all of these statements through The Simpsons and through record album covers and all that. They're showing the Space Needle, and they're showing it collapsing, and they're showing fire and explosives and all that. And they'll have either 3/11 or 11/3, because in America we say November 3. In Europe, they say 3 November. So you'll either see 3/11 or 1/13 at various places in movies and things like that that are coming out. So they plan these things ahead of time. Satan is never happy unless he pushes it in our face and wants to smear it all over us and say, so they can say, oh, how stupid the Goyim are. We put it right in front of their face and they don't even recognize it. So that's the way that Satan doesn't have any fun, nor do his followers have any fun unless they put it right in your face and smear it all over you and say how stupid you are. In your pocket, as we've talked about before, you're carrying around money, which has the whole plan on it, on the back of your dollar bill. It says, Annuit Sepsis, Novus Ordo Seclorum, announcing the birth of the New World Order. That's on the back of your dollar bill. You're carrying it around. People don't know it. They have no idea. You say there's going to be a new world. Oh, no, they'd never do anything like that. They couldn't do anything like that. We vote. Well, you know, if voting is some man said, if voting were important to electing somebody, they wouldn't let us do it. So voting is just a way for people to think they're involved when the one who's going to be elected has already been picked. It turns out that they actually picked Donald Trump because he's a Jew. They picked him. He was their third choice, but they had their reasons for allowing it, and he would get more support from the people, so they decided to do it that way because that way they could remain undercover a little bit longer. So people talk about, are we ever going to have a Jewish president? Well, out of the last 13 presidents, folks, 9 of them have been Jews. 9 of the last 13 have been Jews. Starting with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. His name was Rosenvelt, Rosenvelt, Rosenvelt. He changed it, okay? And in this new book, I have his whole lineage. Winston Churchill was a Jew, too. His mother was Jenny Jerome. I have his lineage in this book. And so we've got Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Then the next president was, coming towards now, was Harry Solomon Truman. They never said his middle name. It was always Harry S. Truman. But it was Solomon. He was a Jew. And he was a Mason as well. So Masonry is run by the Jews. The Jews admit that even the oaths they take in Freemasonry are almost identical to the ones they do in B'nai B'rith, which is a Jewish organization. And so Freemasonry is the way for the Jews to control the Gentiles as they go up the ladder without them converting to Judaism, okay? Because they don't want Gentiles to convert to Judaism because we're lower than dirt, and so they don't want us that close to them. So we got Harry S. Truman, and then we've got Eisenhower. Eisenhower was a Jew. Eisen, nobody forget E-I-S-E-N, that's Jewish. Eisenhower was a Jew. I've got his West Point yearbook where it says he's a Swedish Jew. All right. So then we've got Kennedy. Now, Kennedy is not Jewish, and I don't think he was a Freemason, but he's from an Illuminati family. There are 13 Illuminati bloodlines, and Kennedy was one of them. However, Kennedy was actually a patriot of America, even though his father was involved with the mafia. His father was involved with the mafia for a long time. And he said when his son became president, Meyer Lansky was head of the mafia. The mafia is not Italian. Even John Gotti, his mother was Jewish. Okay, even though he's got an Italian name, his mother was Jewish. So Meyer Lansky was head of the mafia for years and years and years, and he was a Jew. But in Jewish Hollywood, they always depict the mafia as being Italian to just throw everybody off so they won't know it was Jewish. So have I told this story about Meyer Lansky before on your?
No.
Meyer Lansky, one of his major drug runners was Joe Kennedy, which was John Kennedy's father. So he worked for the mafia. And then he was found to be keeping some of the money. So Meyer Lansky put out a hit on Joe Kennedy. And so Joe Kennedy went into Meyer Lansky and pled for his life. And he said, my son is going to be president one day. And when he's president, I will let you have free run. He will let you have free run of the whole country to do your bad stuff. So he was talking, though, not about John Kennedy. He was talking about Joe, his oldest son, who ended up being killed in World War II. So then Jack Kennedy was the next one, and Jack Kennedy became president, and Bobby Kennedy, his brother, became attorney general. But they started putting all the mafia in prison, and they sent them out of the country, and so then Meyer Lansky got really upset. And see, people don't realize that the mafia works very closely with the CIA. When the CIA brings all the drugs in, which they do, that's why we're in Afghanistan, because I got pictures on my website of our military guarding the poppy fields. That's why we're in Afghanistan, to make sure we control the drugs and bring them into America to get everybody on drugs. So when drugs come in, then they're given to the mafia to distribute all over the country. And then some of that money is given back to the government, and then they do the black operations where they are doing all the underhanded stuff, and they fund that with non-government money, with the money from the drugs. So when Jack Kennedy became president, either his father didn't tell him about that or he ignored that, and that's one of many reasons that he got shot, because he was getting rid of the mafia. Okay, so now we've got. So my point is that all of these, the only presidents since Roosevelt that have not been Jewish or Freemason or an Illuminati were Carter and Nixon. Lyndon Johnson was a Jew. Called a crypto Jew. He was a Jew pretending to be a Gentile. The Bushes are Jewish. They have changed their name as well. The Clinton is undoubtedly a Jew, because Hillary Clinton is a Jew and she has admitted it. She now says, oh, well, her grandmother's second marriage was to a Jew, but no, her maiden name was not Rodham, it was Raditsky. And so she's Jewish. She would have never married a non-Jew. So Clinton has to be Jewish. He is rumored to be a bastard son of a Rockefeller. Okay, his mother worked for the Rockefellers. So Clinton is undoubtedly a Jew, and he was a member of De Molay, which is the Young Masons. He was a member of De Molay when he was young. Ronald Reagan they gave him an honorary Freemason membership. And of course, Obama's mother was Jewish. And so Trump is a Jew. So we have had all sorts of Jews. Jews are only 1.2% of the population, but they've been about 2/3 of the presidents we've had since in the last 100 years. Okay. So now let's go to the Twin Towers. Twin Towers, they gave us all sorts of information about that before it happened, if anybody was watching. But of course, most people aren't. most people who just listen even to the TV news aren't looking at rap album covers or things like that, or maybe The Simpsons. So they don't pick up on these things. But when the Twin Towers happened, first of all, nobody saw the first tower hit by a plane. They admit that. Nobody saw the first tower hit by a plane. But after it started coming down and the journalists were there, I noticed at that time that the only people they were interviewing, which was always strange, the only people they were interviewing were people from television stations. And I thought, how come these people from television stations are all downtown near the World Trade Center? Well, then, of course, then it was a total hoax. And so no planes hit the Twin Towers. I saw a video where one of the planes, the second Twin Tower, when the plane came in, I saw it go clear through the Twin Tower and come out the other side with the nose intact. Well, obviously that was Photoshop. So Twin Towers didn't hit the buildings. They was a controlled demolition. Something like 30,000 scientists have said so. But people love to be deceived. As I have said many times, you can deceive millions of people at a time, but you can only teach truth to one person at a time, because people are so easily deceived, and particularly when they watch television. When you are reading a book, your mind is in beta waves. And you can stop and when you're reading a book and think about things, but when you're watching television, everything is moving very fast, and the flicker actually puts you immediately into alpha waves. They've done a study where they show if they take a person who has never watched TV in their life, which would be hard to find now except in some other country, and you put them in front of a TV set, the first time it takes them several minutes to go into alpha waves. The second time, it takes them about a minute. Second time you put them in front of TV. And the third time, they're in seconds. You know, when your children are watching TV, anything, you call them, they don't answer because they're in a trance. They're in a trance. And so that's what happens to everybody when they're watching TV, particularly when things are coming at them very fast like that. And so they're in a trance. And when you're in alpha waves, that information goes directly into your brain without your frontal lobes being able to assess it. That's why people are so easily mind controlled, because they're in alpha waves. By the way, it's also been found when you go to church, you are immediately in alpha waves because of the music, because of the lighting, because you trust what's going on there. So you are easily brainwashed and mind controlled when you go to a church. When you are just reading your Bible by yourself and you are worshiping God directly, you are in beta waves. But when you go to church, you are in alpha waves. It's like you're watching TV. So that's why it's so much easier to convince a person of the truth who has never been to church than somebody who's been raised in a denomination, has gone to church every week for all of their life. They are resistant because their mind is totally controlled. Mm-hmm. So there was no plane that hit the Twin Towers. The Twin Towers came down by controlled demolition. That's the only way that a building can come down in its own footprint. It came down directly. Buildings don't come down like that if they're hit by something. They'll come down and they'll fall this way or that way. These came down in their own footprint. Also, Building 7 was never hit by a plane. It had a small fire in a couple of offices, but fires don't bring metal buildings down. They do not. Shortly after 9/11, there was I think it was Madrid, Spain, there was a high-rise building as high as the towers that caught on fire. When the fire was done burning, it was all burned out, but all of the metal was still thick. Mm-hmm. And you use pans that are stainless steel. They do not melt when you cook with them. And so in order for these steel beams to go down, they had to be cut with charges. And in the history since the Twin Towers had been built, they'd never been closed down for even a day, so people couldn't get into their offices until the weekend before 9/11. When the whole weekend it was closed down completely. And so that's when they put all the charges in. And of course, no Jews were killed in 9/11 because they all told ahead of time that it was going to happen. So there were no Jews who died in the Twin Towers.
Just like Larry Silverstein also had said that the damage was so bad at Building 7, so they had to pull it. He was quoted saying that.
Right. Yeah, they had to pull it. And of course, they had to pull Building 7 because it had all the mechanism to demolish the Twin Towers. So they had to destroy that evidence too. And of course, Silverstein had just purchased the Twin Towers like 6 months or so ahead of time and had all sorts of insurance put on them. So if they were destroyed in some sort of a terrorist incident, he would get double and all that. I mean, it's all really foul. Yeah. So
us, it seems like it's so obvious. Like, why are people still buying into the lie?
Well, the answer is this. The answer to all of that is this. Why are people so dense and can't see this? Well, that's God's plan. Before the flood, it's estimated that, I don't want to lose my place here, I'm the Twin Towers here, but before the flood, it's estimated that there were 3 billion people on Earth. That's a lot of people. That's almost half of what we have now. But people lived to be over 900 years old, and they had sometimes hundreds of children. So the Earth was quite thoroughly populated, at least parts of the Earth. And how many, Noah was building the boat in the desert, this gigantic boat in the desert, and he preached for 120 years, and how many did he convert? Not one. He didn't convert a single soul. And in 2 Peter, the Bible talks about that. It says, and before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying. No, Jesus says this in Matthew 24. It says they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until the flood came and took them all away. So shall it be with the coming of the Son of Man. And Jesus is going to come soon. I don't know the day or the hour. The Bible says we won't know the day or the hour. But then people say, oh, you have no idea when it's going to be. But Jesus kept saying, watch and be ready, watch and be ready, watch and be ready. Well, what are we going to watch for if we have no idea when it's going to be coming? Well, he said we won't know the day and the hour. He did not say we won't know the month and the year. All right. I don't claim to know the month or the year, but he didn't say that we won't know when it's close. Right? And it's close now. It's close now because all these things are being fulfilled, which are the prophecies in Daniel and Revelation and Thessalonians and other areas in the Bible, which I have studied since the time I was a child. I just didn't think it was going to happen in my lifetime, but it is. So the Twin Towers came down, and clearly that was an inside job. And what did we have after that? We had the Homeland Security. You have to have special things to get on an airplane. You have to be patted down. And so this is all the plan for humiliating Gentiles. So people can touch all of them. And now there's been all sorts of, sexual predators doing this and all that. It's just again, a way. See, the Talmud, which is the holiest book of Judaism, is a thing of many, many laws, many, many laws. It controls every minute of the life of an Orthodox Jew. And as you see more and more laws being passed, they want to control every moment of our life. I think it's October 1 next year. You're not going to be able to get on an airplane to even travel within the country without a smart ID. Are you aware of that? No. Yeah, October 1. So you better get a smart ID. You either get a smart driver's license or you get a smart card with your passport, or you'll have to use your passport. You will not be able to get on a plane and travel within the United States without that evidence. This is all communism. When I was behind the Iron Curtain years ago, before the wall came down, I was in Russia. I was actually in Siberia, and I was operating with other doctors there. It was still a communist country. It was still the Soviet Union. We were not allowed to talk to the Russian doctors. except over the operating room cable. We were not allowed to eat at the same table with them. We were not allowed to have any conversations with them. Okay. And so if somebody's sneaking.
That's why I was distracted earlier. He's like making food in the kitchen or something. I'm like, sorry.
So the point is that our guide was so excited because she was going to be going to Moscow on her vacation, which is the way they say it, Moscow. They don't say Moscow, they call it Moscow. So she said, I'm just waiting for my passport. I said, this is all in Russia. You have to have a passport to go from Siberia to Moscow? She said, yes. So they had to have a passport. Now, this is like 35 years ago. They had to have a passport. This is communism, and nobody gets it. This is communism. The idea that they can have mandatory vaccinations, which means that they are allowed, or they say they are allowed, to inject you with poison into your body, to inject you and your children with poisonous substances. This is communism. This is tyranny, and nobody gets it. So I think that the other thing is the Twin Towers wreckage. By the way, the wreckage of the Oklahoma bombing was also taken all away and buried, and it's now guarded, all the stuff, so nobody could investigate it. The same thing happened with the Twin Towers. That was all. There were nuclear bombs in the basement as well to disrupt the foundation, and so all of that was radiation, and that's why so many first responders are dying of cancer now. Again, they don't care. The Jews don't care. They want to get rid of all of us goyim anyway, so they don't care. And they're blaming it on Osama bin Laden or whatever. Osama bin Laden worked for the CIA. I have pictures of him as Tim Osmond selling munitions for the CIA, the short haircut, nothing around his head, just a regular guy. He also was a business partner of George H.W. Bush. And after 9/11, when there was no flying, no airplanes could fly immediately after, what did the government do? They went in airplanes and got all of Osama bin Laden's family out of the United States and took them to another country so they would be safe, so that people wouldn't be angry against them because supposedly Osama bin Laden did this. He didn't do it. The Israeli Mossad did it in conjunction with the Jews that run America. That's who did 9/11. Osama bin Laden at the time of 9/11 was actually in the hospital having dialysis. He had all sorts of medical problems, including diabetes. They had kidney failure, and he was in dialysis. He died, I think, in 2001. So this whole thing in 2011, when Hillary talks about how they went and got Osama, he'd been dead for 10 years already. You know, this is just all garbage, all garbage. Then we have Fukushima, which happened in 2011. That was another false flag. This is all weather control. The whole tsunami was caused by detonations and scalar waves going up and going down, disrupting the tectonic plates in the ocean offshore of Fukushima. They had to do it several times. I have those seismologic records as well. They had to do it several times before they got a tsunami big enough to go in and destroy Fukushima. Why did they want to do that? Well, first, they had, in Israel, they had formed this Stuxnet virus, S-T-U-X-N-E-T, the Stuxnet virus that they wanted to use to invade the Siemens control mechanism. Siemens, S-I-E-M, either E-N-S or A-N-S. They make X-ray equipment. You used to have Siemens X-ray in the hospital. And they make the all of the mechanism that controls nuclear reactors and all that. So in Israel, they formed this Stuxnet virus, which would destroy that, so they couldn't control it. And Iran was smart enough to be able to find that and keep it out of their mechanism. But they used it on Japan, and they used it at Fukushima. So that's one reason the damage has been so bad, because they couldn't shut off the reactors because of this Stuxnet virus. And one reason it appears that they were so angry with Japan is recently, right before 2011 and the few years before that, Japan had become very interested, had a lot of sales of books showing that the Holocaust is a hoax. And so they were going to punish them. and therefore punish us too, because all this radiation comes over to the west coast of America as well. And that's why in the Bible, it talks about the sea creatures dying in the sea, in the ocean. And that's what's happening right now. This is one of the plagues, of the last plagues. And that's happening right now, and it's caused by these sorts of things. So Fukushima was done on purpose. And now they don't have any place to put the radiation anymore, so they're just dumping it completely into the Pacific Ocean. All right, now we'll go to 2012, which is Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook, no children died at Sandy Hook. Nobody died at Sandy Hook. In fact, Adam Lanza is not even a person. Adam Lanza was supposed to be the one who did it. He's a made-up character. He supposedly was just this little tiny guy, and he was supposed to get into the Sandy Hook school, which had a locked door. Somebody would have had to have let him in with all of these guns and all of this stuff. And they said later that some of these little children who are little and they're not a very big target, some of them got shot 11 times by this guy who had supposedly no training in shooting guns, but he would shoot each little kid 11 times. I mean, it's just so preposterous, but that doesn't matter because people will believe anything. People will believe anything. You see it on the news, it must be true. It's absolutely garbage. And they showed the police running up to the front of the building. Well, in the front of the building where the police are running up, either there is grass or is no grass, except on the one they showed was the opposite. In other words, if Sandy Hook had grass in front, what they showed is no grass. And if Sandy Hook doesn't have grass, they showed grass. So it wasn't even done. The pictures that they showed on TV wasn't even done in front of that school. That school hadn't been used for years because you can prove that the internet had not been in that school for years. It was scheduled for demolition. It was an empty school. Nobody was going to school there. The children who sang at the Super Bowl the following year after 9/11 were the grown-up kids whose pictures were used as the supposed ones who died at Sandy Hook. That's, again, it's revelation of the method in your face. We're pushing it in your face. You are so stupid. We have these kids singing in front of you, and we're telling you that these kids died. These are the very kids, you stupid jerks, okay? So the whole thing is Sandy Hook was not being used as a school. You can prove that over and over again. And the other thing is they said they were going to leave the body. First of all, as a doctor, I know that police cannot pronounce people dead unless they're decapitated. It's only the police that were allowed in there. The fire engines and paramedics even were kept way away. They weren't allowed to go in. The police decided all these kids were dead. Well, there's nobody in there. Okay? They decided all these kids were dead. And how about Adam Lanza, this great shot? Every kid was dead. Now, the other thing, apparently the principal was a woman. She was also dead, except she appeared at the Boston bombing, very much alive. So these are all crisis actors that are talking about this. These are all hired people. There used to be a thing on the internet, a website called Crisis Actors. Now they've taken it down. They call it something else. But they're putting up, sometimes you can predict false flags because they put up there, we need crisis actors for this event in Boston or this event in Nebraska or this event over here. And you know when they're going to do it. And so these were all crisis actors, and Adam Lanza didn't even exist. He had a brother, Ryan, and then it first said that, he'd killed his mother at home, and then his mother was a teacher. No, his mother wasn't a teacher, and they just changed it all the time. And people don't even get it. They believe what they see on television because they don't think. They don't think. They don't want to think. It's too much trouble to think. And they don't want to be different from anybody else. That's why, again, Antifa, they cover their faces and they all do it together. And it's just sort of like a clique in high school. And as I've said many times to people like that, grow up and take responsibility for your actions. You're acting like a child. So, Sandy Hook, nobody died. And in fact, the government keeps records of all the deaths in every state. And when people started looking at Connecticut for the year 2012 in December, nobody died, according to government records. And yet all these kids at Sandy Hook apparently died. And all these people that were on TV and talking about their children dying and talking about all this, those people were all given houses 2 years before Sandy Hook took place. They came from other places. They came to Newtown, Connecticut, and they were given houses. And the houses were registered in the registrar's office of the city or the county on Christmas Day, which is not even open on Christmas Day. So you know that's an inside job too. Okay. So they were paid off with that, and they've gotten all sorts of money sent to them, oh, these poor people. The other thing is when the children were supposedly killed in there, they were left in there for 3 days. They're going to say, oh, this happened on, I guess, Friday. We're not going to take them out till Sunday. Why? They're going to be all decaying and stinking and all that. This is crazy. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. So then they said, oh, we took them out on Saturday night. See, they said they were going to take them out on Sunday, but then there wouldn't be any journalists there till Sunday. So then they took them out on Saturday night when nobody was there. Of course, there was nobody in there. Okay. And then they said that the parents weren't allowed to see their children. Well, are you kidding? If your child had died, could they ever keep you with a bunch of wild horses from seeing your child? Never in a million years. And all these parents agreed, oh, okay, we don't need to see our kids. We don't even need to know if it's our child in there. This is ridiculous. But everybody buys it. So that's Sandy Hook. Nobody died at Sandy Hook. Nobody died in the Boston bombing. Nobody died in the Boston bombing. It was even said over the microphone that it was a test. It was a test. Those were smoke bombs. I have pictures of people on the ground before they spread around the blood, which was bright orange. When blood is on the ground, it is not bright orange. I can tell you that. I'm a doctor. I've seen a lot of fresh blood. I've seen a lot of old blood. It's never bright orange. They didn't have a good color for the blood. And you saw them sprinkling it around. And the guy who was taken out with the wheelchair, supposedly both of his legs had been blown off. I'm an orthopedic trauma surgeon. One thing you learn on your first day as a resident is if somebody's got even broken femurs, 2 broken femurs, you don't sit them up because they bled so much into their legs. If you sit them up, they'll die. This guy, they were taken out in a wheelchair, and he had both legs blown off. And they take him out in a wheelchair, and he's totally with it, and took him out not just once, but twice, so they could get pictures of him. And then at one point, he had a prosthesis on one leg to make it look like it had been blown off, and it started falling off, so the guy had to stop it and reattach this stupid-looking prosthesis. I've seen a lot of legs that were blown off or cut off or smashed off in automobile accidents. They never look like this. It's a bad job that they made of the prosthesis they put on him. And so, I mean, these are all crisis actors. None of these people were real. And again, everybody buys it. I was up at my high school reunion shortly after the Boston bombing. I was up in Auburn, Washington, near Seattle, where I had gone to high school. I went to a Christian boarding school up there. And one of my classmates said that her son had been running in the Boston bombing, and her daughter, her son-in-law, was running, and her daughter was there watching. And oh, how terrible it was. How terrible, terrible, terrible it was. And I said to her, I'm sure it was frightening for you when you first heard about it and all that. But then I started explaining these things. Well, I was an outcast. I was an outcast. And one of my classmates there, named Glenn, he had become a minister. And shortly, this was at the end of the weekend that we were having the reunion. And so he said the closing prayer, and he prayed in the prayer for everybody there that I would quit lying.
Oh, God.
Yeah, prayed that I would quit lying.
Thank you for everything, God, and just make Dr. T stop telling lies.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's
That's like I'm sitting here with you, and every time you tell me these stories, and we've went over all this before, I'm like laughing, and there's still that part of me that's like, people do not think this is funny,
Yeah.
you know, and yet I do, because it's just blatant lies.
Yeah, it's just all lies. So in the Boston bombing, they faked all that. And there's all sorts of evidence. And if you get my book, which won't be available for at least a year, I will give you all the evidence for this. The Boston bombing, nobody died, nobody was hurt. You will also notice that after the bomb first went off, which was just smoke, by the way, after it first went off, before they sprayed the orange blood around, everybody is lying down on the sidewalk, but they have their hand under their head, lifting them up like this. Now, if you're really injured, you're not doing that. They didn't want to get their head down on the dirty sidewalk because they weren't really injured. Because if you're really injured, you don't care about whether your head's on the sidewalk or not. But if you notice, all these people were holding themselves up. It's just, all of it is ludicrous. And yet, the public they're easily fooled. Everybody is easily fooled because nobody engages their brain when they see these things. And part is they see it on television. They're in alpha waves. Their brain does not have the opportunity to analyze this before it goes right into their memory. And so they are mind controlled. Mm-hmm. Now, the other thing, have we discussed the false flags? Have we discussed the going to the moon? Did we do that?
No.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to do a brief on that. Because there's a new video out that you should go on the internet and find before they take it down. It's called NASA Admits We Never Went to the Moon. And it's only 9 minutes long. Now, there's another one. I have a full video called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. And that gives many, many reasons why we know that we didn't go to the moon, such as the waving flag, because there's no atmosphere on the moon, so there's no wind. There's no crater under the space capsule when it comes down. There's no crater, which there always would be. And the third major thing is we can't get through the Van Allen radiation belt. Now, Van Allen radiation belt was discovered by James Van Allen in 1958. I learned about it in college. I learned about the Van Allen radiation belt in college, that it is this huge radiation belt that goes around the Earth that you can't get through. And yet somehow we went to the moon. Well, this new video is only 9 minutes long, and the guy admits that there are all sorts of reasons to show we never went to the moon. This was all done on a sound stage in Hollywood, directed by Stanley Kubrick. Okay. This was all done that way. And probably astronauts weren't even in the spacesuits because you never see their faces. The other thing, the shadows. The shadows are all going different directions. If they were on the moon, it would be the sun that would be the only light, and all the shadows would be going in the same direction. But on a soundstage, there's lights everywhere, and so the shadows are going in different directions. And on the space landing, the shadows were all going in different directions, number one. And then there's a big rock on the moon, and it has a C on it from central casting. I mean, it is so bizarre. And everything, we went to the moon, we went to the moon. Well, you probably weren't born yet when we went to the moon, right? But I was. I remember that day. That's why it's good to be old, because I am going to, it'll probably be a 2-volume book. I am going to preserve the history of America and the world for the last 100 years, because they're taking it all down. And fortunately, I kept hard copies of everything. I've got so many articles, they're coming out my ears. And my sons say, Mom, you got a mess of articles. Yeah, but now it's good because they're taking it all down, but I have them. So I have all the proof for all of these things. And so at my age, I was around when all these things happened. I was around when Marilyn Monroe was murdered. I was around when John Kennedy, I remember the day that John Kennedy was murdered. I remember the day that we supposedly went to the moon. I was on my first rotation, my first month of my internship. I went to medical school late because I graduated as a dental hygienist. I got married. I was a dental hygienist for 6 years before I went to medical school. And that's why when I was accepted for medical school, at that time, they wouldn't accept you if you were over 28. Now they'll accept you when you're, I think, 60. It's so dumb. They'll do all this training for someone who has no years left to practice. And of course, very few medical schools at that time would even accept the application from a woman, because I was born, as I told you, I think only like 17 or 20 years after women got the right to vote in America. And some people think she must be 120 years old. Not quite, but it is good to be this old, because I was around when all these things happened. So I was in my first month of my internship at San Francisco General Hospital in July of 1969. And I was in the emergency room, rotating through there, and it happened to be a lull, and all of the doctors who were in the emergency room, the interns, were able to get around the television set and watch us land on the moon. Okay? But in order to land on the moon, they had to go through the Van Allen radiation belts. Well, this guy on this little video, 9 minutes, where it's named Go On Look, NASA Admits We Never Went to the Moon. There's interviews of astronauts in training now, and they say, we really want to go to the moon. And as soon as they figure out how to get through the Van Allen radiation belts, we'll be able to go. I said, excuse me? I watched them go to the moon. If they don't know how to get through the Van Allen radiation belts now, how did they do it then? Okay, well, they didn't do it then. They faked it all. And so then there's one really brainless, I mean, these are the guys, women and guys who are astronauts. They have no brains at all. One guy said, he's an astronaut in training. He said, I would go to the moon in a nanosecond. He said, you know, we used to have the technical ability to go to the moon, but we destroyed it. And it's hard to get it back again. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? And yet people, oh, really? Oh, and not only that, the space capsule outside was aluminum, and the astronauts' clothing was a sheet of aluminum, a sheet of rubber, and a sheet of some other kind of fabric. That's all the protection they had from the Van Allen radiation belts. Okay. These are, and the reason God put the Van Allen radiation belts around the Earth was so we are the planet that is contaminated with sin. He doesn't want us to go out and contaminate other planets. So then we can't get through this, see? Because even not only would the people die, and they can't send animals to the moon either because they can't get through. They die before they got through. But even the guidance systems and all that are affected by this real heavy radiation. But the astronauts all got through with just aluminum on the outside, all right? And just this little bit of aluminum and rubber on their clothing to protect them. Wow, they are really heroes because they went through all this and got through it. When you go to the dentist, and they're going to take a little itty-bitty x-ray, they put a 15-pound lead shield on you. They didn't even have that to go to the moon and get through the Van Allen radiation belt. I mean, it is just preposterous. But you talk to people and say, oh, no, they went. Oh, no, I know they went. No, they didn't go. You know, just engage your brain. Nobody engages their brain. Fortunately, my father, when I was growing up, taught me how to think. Nobody thinks anymore. So these people didn't go to the moon, and they're admitting it but they're saying we used to know this, but then we destroyed it. We destroyed the technology. Now we're trying to get it back again. It is so, I mean, you just have to say, you know what I think? You know, as you know, God's going to eventually save everybody. And in my book called If Jesus Died for All, Why Can't He Save All? And I show that he's obligated to save us all. Because if you and your husband, yes, right, there it is. If you and your husband give birth to a child who is physically or mentally defective, that child is your responsibility. Now, if you keep doing it, it's even worse. The child is even more your responsibility. God, the Bible says in Romans 11:36, the Bible says all is of God. All is of God. So who put Satan in the Garden of Eden in Adam and Eve's front yard? God did. Then he said, oh, don't eat of the tree. Well, they'd never seen death. They'd never seen sin. So what did they do? They ate of the tree. God's responsible for sin entering the world, not Satan. Satan's responsible. Can Satan do anything that God does not allow? Well, then that always stumps people. Is Satan a God equal with God? No. God says, I created the waster to destroy. My hand formed the crooked serpent. I, the Lord, did this. I create good and I create evil. So God has a special reason for doing this. We don't appreciate good unless we see evil. Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden never thanked God for the wonderful garden they lived in because they didn't know anything else. They never thanked God for their perfect health. They didn't know anything else. They never thanked God for walking in the garden every day, being able to talk with him. They didn't know anything else until they sinned, and then they knew something else. So we never appreciate good unless we experience evil, even if a person gets a cold. If they get a bad cold, and at the end of the cold, I can breathe again. So you don't appreciate good unless you have some experience with evil. And that's why God allowed us to fall into sin, but he's going to save us all. But I think about all these people who don't have the ability to think. I mean, they can't do anything. And God is going to open their minds. They're all going to become smart one day after they've reaped what they've sown. And they're all going to be great people. And I think, boy, that is a genius God, because I've met some really dumb people who don't know how to think. And God's going to make them wise when they get. See, everybody has to have enough trouble that they recognize their need for God to run their life. And that's why the earth is getting so bad. Because there are a lot of people who say, I don't need God. I don't need God. Well, wait till it hits, buddy. And wait till it hits, and then you're going to need God. And then that's how we learn to know God. We learn that we need him to run our life, because people think they can run their own life and they're a mess. And so God's going to win every one of those people back. They're all going to be smart. They're all going to be wise because they will know the Lord. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And the only way you can really know truth is to know God. And he's the one that will open your mind to discerning truth, so you can understand what is truth and what is error. All these people, they don't know. They're all flopping around. Sometimes they know truth in one area, but they're way off in another. The only way we can know the whole truth is to know the Lord, who will open up our mind and show us what is truth and what is error. So we have gone through the false flags. We haven't got to the assassinations. I guess we'll have to have those for the next time.
Yeah. I would say let's just keep going, but I know all my family's out in the front yard.
Yeah. So why don't we just stop here? We can do the assassinations next time.
Okay.
We're going to do Marilyn Monroe, John Kennedy Sr., Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, Princess Grace of Monaco, Vince Foster, Sonny Bono, JFK Jr., Osama bin Laden, which we've already discussed, and Joan Rivers. Okay,
we'll put our Holocaust hoax on
for another, for another one. Okay, so we can do those next time, because I was around for all of those, including Marilyn Monroe, which was way back in 1962. I remember that day specifically. So, people really don't know how she died. They think she took an overdose. She did not.
I look forward to it.
Okay. So anyway, then we might be back on our old schedule, but we'll discuss that after we're off the air. So, okay. All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And bye, Dr. Dave.
Bye-bye.